The morning dew clung to the wheat stalks as Hanbin Park walked through his fields, checking the crops as he did every dawn. His weathered hands brushed against the golden heads of wheat, a far cry from the weapons they once held. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the fertile land of New Haven Colony. 7 years had passed since he'd sealed away his combat armor. The nightmares still came sometimes, memories of the enhancement wars, of what they'd done to him in those sterile labs to create the perfect soldier. But here, surrounded by peaceful farmland and the gentle sounds of nature, those memories felt distant. Inside their modest farmhouse, he could hear Na-Young getting ready for her morning routine. His 16-year-old daughter moved with a grace that reminded him painfully of her mother, but beneath that delicate exterior lay strength that could bend steel. The genetic modifications that had made him a super soldier had passed down to her, though they'd kept that secret buried deep. "Ready for practice, Appa?" Na-Young called out, stepping onto the porch. Her long black hair was tied back in a practical braid, and she wore simple working clothes. Despite the early hour, her eyes sparkled with energy. Hanbin nodded, leading the way to their barn. The structure looked ordinary from the outside, but they'd reinforced the interior to withstand their morning training sessions. Inside, heavy farming equipment lined the walls alongside weights that would challenge even industrial loading mechs. "Remember," Hanbin said, watching as Na-Young warmed up, "control is more important than strength." He'd taught her this lesson countless times, but it bore repeating. One slip, one moment of forgetting her own power, could expose their secret or hurt someone. Na-Young rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "I know, Appa. You've only told me about 1,000,000 times." She proceeded to lift a tractor's engine block with one hand, holding it steady as she went through the control exercises he designed. Hanbin watched with pride as she maintained perfect form, her enhanced muscles making the enormous weight seem like nothing more than a toy. She had his strength, but none of the burden of how it was obtained. No labs, no surgeries, no pain, just a gift passed down from father to daughter. As Na-Young moved through her exercises, Hanbin's datapad buzzed. The colony's defense network sent regular updates to all former military personnel, usually routine reports about weather and shipping traffic. This alert was different. The long-range sensors had detected an unregistered ship at the edge of their system. Hanbin's enhanced eyes scanned the technical data, his blood running cold as he recognized the signature pattern of the energy readings. "Appa." Na-Young had stopped her exercises, noticing his tension. "What's wrong?" Hanbin forced a smile. "Nothing, just some sensor readings." He didn't want to worry her, but his combat-enhanced brain was already calculating possibilities, escape routes, defensive positions. Later that morning, he attended the colony's militia meeting. The other farmers-turned-defenders dismissed the sensor reading as a glitch, laughing off his concerns. They hadn't fought in the enhancement wars. They hadn't seen what he'd seen. The energy signature matched the Rathi ships perfectly, the same aliens who had nearly wiped out 3 human colonies before the super soldiers turned the tide. Their organic technology gave their vessels a distinct power signature, one that had been burned into Hanbin's memory during countless battles. Walking home, Hanbin found himself studying the peaceful colony with new eyes. The scattered farms, the central marketplace, the school where Na-Young studied, all of it suddenly looked fragile. He hadn't survived the enhancement wars by ignoring his instincts, and right now, every enhanced nerve in his body was screaming danger. That evening, as Na-Young did her homework at the kitchen table, Hanbin made a decision. He went to the basement, to a locked room Na-Young had never seen. Inside, beneath dust and farming tools, lay a hidden panel. His fingerprint still opened it after all these years. The combat armor lay within, its dark surface absorbing the light. He'd sworn never to wear it again, to leave behind the weapon they'd made him into. But as he stared at the armor, remembering its power and what it represented, Hanbin knew he might need it one more time. Because the Rathi were coming, whether the colony believed it or not. And this time, they weren't just threatening some distant battlefield. They were threatening his home, his peaceful life, and most importantly, his daughter. Han Bin closed the panel, leaving the armor hidden but ready. Above, he could hear Naeun laughing at something on her datapad, the sound of innocent joy in their quiet home. He would do anything to protect that laughter, to keep her safe from the horrors he'd known. The sun set over New Haven Colony, painting the wheat fields gold. To most, it looked like another peaceful evening. But Han Bin Park, former super soldier and current farmer, knew better. The war was coming to their doorstep, whether they were ready or not. The supply truck rumbled along the dusty road as Han Bin checked his manifest one more time. 3 hours from home was further than he liked to be, but the colony needed these medical supplies. The morning sun beat down on the transport's metal roof as he supervised the loading process at the spaceport. Something felt wrong. The feeling had been growing stronger all morning, an itch at the base of his skull that his enhanced senses couldn't quite place. He checked his datapad again. No messages from Naeun, which was unusual. She always sent him funny pictures or comments during her lunch break at school. High above New Haven Colony, hidden by thick cloud cover, the Rothi ships hum like massive insects. Their bioorganic hulls pulsed with life, scanning the settlement below. Inside the lead vessel, the Rothi scientists clustered around their scanning equipment, their mandibles clicking rapidly as they processed the data. Genetic anomaly detected. One chittered, its compound eyes reflecting the purple glow of their displays. Human female, approximately 16 cycles. Enhanced cellular structure, similar to their warrior program. The Rothi commander's antennae twitched with excitement. They had come seeking human test subjects, but this was beyond their expectations. A naturally inherited enhancement was precisely what their research required. Naeun was walking home from her friend's house, taking the shortcut through the wheat fields. She had her music playing, her bag swinging carelessly as she moved with the natural grace that came from her enhanced genetics. The first shadow that passed overhead didn't register. Birds were common enough over the fields. But when the shadow grew larger, blocking out the sun entirely, she looked up. Her enhanced reflexes saved her from the first capture attempt, letting her dodge the biomechanical net that shot down from above. Purple ichor dripped from the living metal as it retracted. "Help!" she screamed, her voice carrying across the empty fields. Her fingers fumbled with her datapad, trying to call her father. The device slipped from her hands as she ducked another attack. The Rothi drop pods crashed into the earth around her, organic shells cracking open to reveal their soldiers. They were tall, insectoid creatures with chitinous armor and multiple limbs. Naeun fell back on her training, her enhanced strength letting her snap one of their arms when they tried to grab her. More pods were falling across the colony now. Screams and weapons fire filled the air as the Rothi launched their coordinated attack. They had studied human defenses well. Their first targets were the communication towers and militia armory. Naeun fought with everything her father had taught her. One Rothi soldier went down with a crushed thorax. Another lost 2 of its limbs to a farming tool she grabbed. Purple blood splattered across her clothes and backpack as she fought. But there were too many. A paralytic dart caught her in the shoulder, her enhanced metabolism already fighting the toxin, but not fast enough. As her limbs grew heavy, she saw more ships descending through the clouds, their organic hulls writhing against the blue sky. "Remarkable," one of the scientists chittered, approaching her fallen form. "Such strength in one so young. The experiments will be most informative." 3 hours away, Han Bin's datapad suddenly came alive with emergency alerts. The colony's automated defenses had activated, but the messages were garbled. Through the static, he caught fragments about ships, about attacks, about casualties. He dropped everything, commandeering the fastest vehicle he could find. The transport's engine screamed as he pushed it beyond its limits, eating up the distance between him and home. His enhanced vision caught sight of the smoke rising on the horizon long before a normal human could have seen it. The colony was in chaos when he arrived. Buildings burned, Bodies lay in the streets, both human and Rathi. The militia had fought back hard, but they had been overwhelmed by the precision and coordination of the attack. Han Bin's house was untouched, but Nayum wasn't there. He found her backpack in the wheat field, torn and stained with purple Rathi blood. Pride mixed with terror in his chest. She had fought back, just as he trained her, but they had taken her anyway. More evidence told the story. Impact craters from drop pods, purple blood splatter patterns that his enhanced mind automatically analyzed, showing him exactly how the fight had played out. Traces of the paralytic toxin the Rathi favored, and worst of all, the distinctive landing marks of their prisoner transport ships. Han Bin knelt in the torn wheat, holding his daughter's ruined backpack. His enhanced hearing picked up the sounds of the colony's survivors organizing rescue efforts, calling for help, treating the wounded. None of that mattered now. The Rathi had taken his daughter. They had seen what she could do, had specifically targeted her for her abilities. He knew what that meant, knew exactly what kind of experiments they would want to perform on someone with naturally inherited enhancements. His hands tightened on the backpack until the material creaked. The peaceful farmer he pretended to be these past 7 years was gone. The Rathi had taken his daughter, not knowing they had just awakened something far more dangerous than any test subject. They had awakened a super soldier, and they would soon learn why even other super soldiers had feared Hanbin Park during the enhancement wars. The abandoned mining complex looked harmless in the fading daylight. Rusted equipment and crumbling buildings dotted the landscape, seemingly forgotten by time. Han Bin parked his vehicle behind a collapsed storage shed, away from any prying eyes that might pass by on the distant road. His enhanced vision easily picked out the hidden security measures still active around the site: motion sensors, heat detectors, and automated defense systems that would deter any curious explorers. He had helped install them himself 7 years ago, when he'd sealed away the part of himself he never wanted Nayum to see. The entrance to the bunker lay beneath an old ore processor. Han Bin cleared away years of debris from the access panel, his movements precise despite the rage burning in his chest. The scanner hummed to life at his touch, reading his palm print and genetic signature. Identity confirmed. Captain Hanbin Park, the system announced, its voice echoing in the empty facility. Warning: security protocols indicate this facility has been decommissioned. Override code: Sierra 7 Delta 9. Hanbin responded. The ground rumbled as ancient machinery awakened, opening a hidden elevator shaft. The platform that rose to meet him was dusty but operational. As he descended into the darkness, memories flooded back. The enhancement wars had created many super soldiers, but few had achieved his level of success with the augmentations. The price had been high. Countless surgeries, experimental drugs, and modifications that had pushed the boundaries of human evolution. The bunker's lights flickered to life automatically, revealing a massive underground chamber. The air was stale but breathable thanks to the sealed environment. Han Bin's footsteps echoed as he walked past rows of empty weapon racks and charging stations. At the far end of the chamber stood his Mark VII combat frame, a masterpiece of military engineering designed specifically for enhanced soldiers. The armor hung suspended in its maintenance cradle, its dark surface absorbing the harsh fluorescent light. It wasn't just equipment. It was a part of him, an extension of his enhanced abilities. Han Bin approached the cryo storage unit first. Inside, sealed vials of enhancement drugs waited in perfect preservation. These weren't the crude chemical cocktails used in the early days of the program. These were refined, perfectly calibrated to his specific genetic modifications. His hands trembled slightly as he loaded the first vial into an injector, not from fear, but from the weight of what this moment meant. Once he reactivated his full capabilities, there would be no going back to the peaceful farmer he pretended to be. The needle found his vein with practiced ease. The familiar burning sensation spread through his body immediately, awakening dormant systems and modifications. His vision sharpened further, colors becoming more vivid as his enhanced optical implants fully activated. His muscles tensed and relaxed as forgotten strength flowed back into them. Maximum enhancement protocol initiated, he muttered, loading the second vial. Each injection built upon the last, bringing him back to his full combat potential. His heart rate increased, then stabilized at its enhanced rhythm. Neural processors that had laid dormant for years came online, flooding his consciousness with tactical data and combat protocols. The Mark VII combat frame seemed to watch him with its dark visor as he approached. The maintenance cradle recognized him, unfolding to present the armor for mounting. Layer by layer, he donned the combat suit that had made him legendary during the war. Each piece clicked into place with satisfying precision. The armor was powered by his own enhanced biology, forming a perfect symbiosis between man and machine. As the final connections were made, system after system came online. Begin system initialization. Han Bin commanded, his voice steady despite the fire burning through his veins. The combat frame's eyes glowed red as it fully activated, interfacing with his enhanced nervous system. Data scrolled across his vision as the suit's capabilities merged with his own. Standing there in the bunker, fully armed and enhanced for the first time in 7 years, Han Bin felt the familiar rush of power. But this time, it wasn't in service of some military objective or political goal. This time, it was personal. The Rathi had taken his daughter, not understanding what they were provoking. He accessed the bunker's computer system, downloading everything it had on Rathi installations and movements. His enhanced mind processed the data instantly, plotting courses and analyzing patterns. They would have taken Ne Young to one of their research facilities. He would find it. And then, the red glow of his armor's eyes intensified as combat protocols fully engage. Han Bin Park, the peaceful farmer, was gone. In his place stood something the Rathi would learn to fear, a father's love combined with the deadliest weapons humanity had ever created. The Rathi outpost hung in orbit around a desolate moon, its organic hull pulsing gently against the starlit backdrop. Inside, the guards went about their normal routines, mandibles clicking as they communicated in their native tongue. None of them noticed the small breach in their lower maintenance sector, where a dark figure had just slipped through their living walls. Han Bin's combat frame adapted to the internal atmosphere automatically. His enhanced vision pierced the purple-tinged darkness of the Rathi architecture, mapping out corridors and life signs. 23 guards, 8 scientists, and 1 commander. His tactical systems calculated optimal routes and attack patterns in milliseconds. The first guard died silently, its chitinous neck crushed before it could sound an alarm. Han Bin moved like a shadow, his armor's stealth systems making him nearly invisible in the organic corridors. The second and third guards fell just as quietly, their bodies hidden in biological waste chutes. Security breach in Sector 7. A voice chittered over the station's communication system. Too late. Han Bin was already in their command center, his enhanced strength ripping through their defensive positions like tissue paper. Purple ichor sprayed across the walls as he tore through the Rathi soldiers. The commander tried to purge their data cores, but Han Bin's augmented reflexes were faster. He caught the insectoid alien by its throat, lifting it off the ground. "The girl," he said, his voice modulated through the combat frame's speakers. "Where?" When the commander only clicked its mandibles defiantly, Han Bin crushed one of its limbs. The creature's screech echoed through the station. "Not here," it finally gasped. Transferred. Processing center in Sector 12. 10 minutes after he had breached the station, Han Bin left through the same hole he had entered. Behind him, he left destruction and terror, a message to the Rathi about what was hunting them. The second outpost was larger, better defended. It didn't matter. Han Bin's combat frame tore through their biomechanical defenses, while his enhanced mind processed their communication channels, gathering intelligence. More pieces of the puzzle fell into place with each dying breath, each fragment of data. By the time he reached the third outpost, the Rathi were beginning to understand the gravity of their situation. Their organic ships clustered together for protection, their weapons primed. They had faced human super soldiers during the enhancement wars, but this was different. This was methodical, relentless. Han Bin breached their defenses through an exhaust port, his armor protecting him from the caustic atmosphere. The Rathi were waiting this time. Their weapons charge. Terminate the human. Their commander ordered, mandibles clicking rapidly in fear. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. Han Bin's enhanced abilities, combined with the combat frame's power, made him virtually unstoppable. He moved faster than their targeting systems could track, his augmented strength letting him tear through their strongest defenses. The girl, he demanded, holding their dying commander. Where did they take her? The commander's compound eyes flickered with recognition. The human female, the one with enhanced genetics. A wet laugh bubbled from its mandibles. You're too late. She's already at the primary research station. Han Bin's grip tightened. Where? The Horus Cluster. The commander clicked out. But you'll never reach her. The station's defenses are impenetrable. They're already learning so much from her enhanced biology. The commander never finished its sentence. Han Bin's armored fist crushed its thorax, purple ichor dripping from his gauntlet. His tactical systems were already plotting a course to the Horus Cluster, calculating fuel requirements and potential resistance. As he left the devastated outpost, Han Bin intercepted Rathi communications from across their network. They spoke of a demon, an unstoppable force destroying their facilities. None of them had made the connection between their precious test subject and the warrior hunting them. None of them understood that they had taken something precious from the deadliest super soldier ever created. In the cold silence of space, Han Bin's combat frame adjusted its course toward the Horus Cluster. His enhanced mind processed everything he had learned, planning his assault on their primary research station. The Rathi thought their defenses were impenetrable. They thought they were safe. They were wrong. No force in the galaxy could stop a father fighting for his daughter. And when Han Bin Park reached their research station, they would learn exactly why he had been the most feared super soldier in the enhancement wars. The stars streaked by as his ship accelerated. Somewhere ahead, Neyung was waiting. And nothing, not Rathi defenses, not space itself, would keep him from reaching her. The massive research station hung against the backdrop of the Horus Cluster's twin suns, its organic hull pulsing with eerie bioluminescent patterns. From his stolen Rathi scout ship, Han Bin's enhanced vision could make out the living defense systems, tentacle-like appendages that would crush any unauthorized vessels that came too close. But Han Bin hadn't come this far to use the front door. His tactical systems had already identified the station's waste elimination system, a network of vents that expelled biological and chemical waste into space. The Rathi, arrogant in their technological superiority, had never considered someone would try to enter through such a toxic environment. The combat frame's stealth systems engaged as Han Bin maneuvered through the debris field surrounding the station. His enhanced mind calculated the timing of the waste expulsions, finding the perfect moment between pulses. As caustic material sprayed into space, he slipped inside. The waste disposal tunnel was a nightmare of toxic chemicals and organic matter. Any normal human would have died in seconds, even with protective gear. But Han Bin's armor, combined with his enhanced physiology, kept him alive as he crawled through the living walls. He emerged into a maintenance sector, his armor coated in substances best left unexamined. The station's interior was a maze of organic corridors, pulsing with the same bioluminescent light that marked its exterior. His tactical display mapped the layout, identifying key areas and life signs. The research labs would have the information he needed. Han Bin moved silently through the corridors, his enhanced reflexes letting him dodge the roving sensor tendrils that grew from the walls. The few maintenance drones he encountered were disabled before they could signal his presence. The research center's security was substantial, but focused on preventing escape rather than infiltration. Han Bin's palm pressed against a neural interface panel, his armor systems bypassing the organic security measures. The doors peeled open like living flesh. Inside, screens made of crystallized biomatter displayed endless streams of data. Han Bin's enhanced mind processed the information rapidly, his rage growing with each new detail. The research logs were comprehensive, documenting everything they had done to his daughter. They had started with basic tests, amazed by Ne Young's natural healing ability. Tissue samples, stress tests, endurance measurements. But their fascination had quickly turned cruel. They had cut her, burned her, exposed her to radiation, all to study how her enhanced cells would respond. The logs showed videos. Ne Young strapped to examination tables, her face contorted in pain as they tested her limits. The wrathy scientists' clinical notes praised her exceptional pain tolerance and remarkable recovery rates. They discussed future tests, each more horrific than the last. Han Bin's vision literally turned red as his combat frame's combat protocols engaged automatically in response to his surge of fury. Warning indicators flashed across his display as his enhanced metabolism dumped combat drugs into his system. The screen under his armored hand shattered. He found their research schedule next. Ne Young was scheduled for a comprehensive cellular stress test in less than an hour. The clinical description couldn't hide the torture they were planning. They wanted to see how much damage her enhanced healing could repair at once. A sound behind him made him turn. A wrathy scientist stood in the doorway, its compound eyes widening at the sight of him. Before it could reach the alarm panel, Han Bin's enhanced speed closed the distance. The creature's exoskeleton cracked under his armored grip. "Where is she?" he demanded, his modulated voice carrying the promise of death. The scientist's mandibles clicked rapidly in terror. Section 7. Laboratory 12. Please. Han Bin ensured the creature couldn't warn others, then accessed more of the station's systems through the research terminals. His daughter was being held in the high-security testing wing, heavily guarded and monitored. The wrathy valued their test subject too much to risk losing her. As he memorized the route to her location, Han Bin's tactical systems were already calculating the most efficient way to tear the station apart. The wrathy had documented their crimes thoroughly, treating his daughter's suffering as fascinating data points for their research. When the alarms finally began to sound, triggered by the discovery of the dead scientist, it was far too late. Han Bin Park, the enhanced super soldier they had pushed into a killing rage, was already moving through their station with unstoppable purpose. The research station's living walls pulsed faster, as if sensing the coming violence. Purple emergency lights cast eerie shadows as security teams mobilized. But they weren't mobilizing to stop an intruder. They were about to face a father's vengeance, enhanced by the deadliest combat systems humanity had ever created, and nothing in their research had prepared them for that. The first security team died before they could even raise their weapons. Han Bin moved through them like a dark wind, his enhanced strength turning their chitinous armor into fragments. Purple blood sprayed across the corridor's organic walls as he tore them apart with his bare hands. His combat frame's warning systems flashed as he disengaged the final safety protocols. The suit's power core hummed dangerously as it channeled everything into his enhanced muscles. Combat drugs flooded his system, pushing his augmentations far beyond their normal limits. Full containment breach in Section 3. The station's communication system blared warnings in the clicking wrathy language. Unknown human intruder. Maximum security alert. Han Bin didn't slow down. A massive security door sealed in front of him, a barrier of living metal designed to contain the most dangerous specimens. He punched straight through it, his armored fist crushing the organic mechanisms. The wrathy had never seen anything like this. More guards came at him with energy weapons. Their shots splashed harmlessly against his armor as he charged into their ranks. His enhanced speed made him appear as nothing but a blur to their compound eyes. Bodies flew through the air as he threw them into walls with bone-crushing force. The station itself tried to stop him. Biomechanical tendrils burst from the walls, attempting to ensnare him. Han Bin tore them apart, using the writhing appendages as weapons against more incoming guards. The corridor behind him looked like a slaughterhouse, purple ichor dripping from every surface. A heavy weapons team had set up at the intersection ahead. Their mounted cannons filled the air with plasma bolts. Han Bin ripped a security turret from its mounting and threw it at them like a spear. The explosion took out half the corridor. "Seal all research sectors." A commander's voice screamed over the communication system. "Protect the test subject at all costs." Those words only fueled Han Bin's rage. His daughter wasn't their test subject. She wasn't their experiment. Emergency barriers slammed down around him. He smashed through them without slowing. Defensive gas flooded the corridors. His armor's filters rendered it useless. More security forces fell before him. His enhanced mind processed every threat, every angle of attack, turning him into an unstoppable engine of destruction. The Rathi had faced human super soldiers before, but never one driven by a father's desperate fury. He reached the research wing's main door. Dozens of guards waited behind fortified positions, their weapons trained on the entrance. Han Bin didn't bother with subtlety. He crashed through the wall beside the door, catching them completely by surprise. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted seconds. His armored hands crushed exoskeletons and tore limbs. He used their own weapons against them, each shot precise despite his berserk fury. His enhanced reflexes let him dodge everything they threw at him, while dealing death with mechanical efficiency. When he reached the central laboratory, the scientists tried to bargain. They clicked about the importance of their research, about how special Ne Young's enhanced genetics were. Han Bin's response was to throw one of them through their precious monitoring equipment. And then he saw her. Ne Young was strapped to a bioorganic examination table, her small form surrounded by horrible machines. Her clothes had been replaced with a thin medical gown that didn't hide the marks of their experiments. But her enhanced healing was already at work, wounds slowly closing even as he watched. Her eyes, so much like her mother's, focused on him. Despite everything they had done to her, despite all the pain, tears of relief filled those eyes. "Appa," she whispered, her voice weak but stable. The last scientist tried to inject her with something. A fail-safe drug, perhaps, or a lethal dose to deny him his daughter. Han Bin's armored hand caught its arm and squeezed. The Rathi's exoskeleton shattered like glass. With infinite gentleness that contrasted sharply with his previous violence, Han Bin began freeing Ne Young from her restraints. His enhanced strength easily broke the organic bonds holding her down. She fell forward into his arms, crying quietly against his armored chest. "I knew you'd come," she whispered in Korean. "I knew you'd find me." "I'll always find you," he answered, his modulated voice soft. "I'll always protect you." The station's alarms were still blaring, and more security forces would be coming. But none of that mattered now. Han Bin had his daughter back, and any Rathi that tried to stop them from leaving would learn why he had been the most feared super soldier in the enhancement wars. The storm of violence wasn't over, but its purpose had changed. No longer a father's desperate search, but a father's protective fury guarding his wounded child. And that perhaps was even more terrifying. The research station's corridors had become an inferno. Han Bin's combat frame protected him from the worst of the heat as he carried Ne Young through the chaos. She clung to his armored form, face pressed against the cold metal as explosions rocked the facility around them. Behind them, the Rathi's organic architecture was burning. Han Bin had triggered an overload in their main reactor, a final act of vengeance that would erase all evidence of their cruel experiments. The living walls were literally screaming as they burned, a sound that would haunt Ne Young's dreams for years to come. "Hold tight," Han Bin's modulated voice instructed as they reached a sealed pressure door. His enhanced strength easily tore through the barrier, exposing them to the emergency evacuation bay. Most of the escape pods were gone, filled with fleeing scientists and guards. They wouldn't get far. Han Bin had already transmitted their coordinates to human military vessels in the sector. The pod he chose was larger than the others, designed for transporting research specimens. The irony wasn't lost on him as he carefully settled Na Young into the cushioned interior. Her enhanced healing was already at work, but she was weak from days of their experiments. As they launched away from the dying station, Na Young watched through the viewport. The massive structure broke apart in a series of explosions, its organic hull rupturing like a wounded creature. The Rathi's research data, their cruel experiments, their torture chambers, all of it disappeared in a final flash of light. The rescue ship that picked them up was a human medical vessel, already notified by Hanbin's emergency beacon. The medical staff had experience with enhanced individuals, but they still seemed awed by Na Young's healing abilities as they treated her wounds. Her recovery rate is remarkable, the chief doctor told Hanbin, who stood guard by her medical pod in his still blood-stained combat frame. The genetic transfer of your enhancements is more complete than we've ever seen. She'll make a full recovery. Hanbin didn't leave her side during the journey. He watched her sleep in the pod, its soft blue light highlighting how young she really was. Too young to have endured such horrors. His armored hand rested on the pod's surface, a silent promise of protection. News of what happened spread quickly through human space. The story grew with each telling. How a single enhanced soldier had torn apart 3 Rathi outposts searching for his daughter. How he had infiltrated their most secure research facility and left it in ruins. How a father's love had proved more powerful than an alien empire's defenses. The Rathi response was immediate and absolute. Their ships withdrew from human-controlled space within days. Diplomatic channels went silent. The proud alien empire, which had weathered wars and rebellions, had been broken by one man's rampage. Other alien species shared the story in quiet conversations. They spoke of the human capacity for violence when protecting their young. They warned each other never to harm a human child, especially one whose parent wore the marks of the enhancement program. Weeks later, Hanbin and Na Young settled into their new home on a distant colony world. The house was similar to their old one, surrounded by fields of wheat that glowed gold in the morning sun. But now it had reinforced walls and hidden security systems, a father's precautions. They still trained together before dawn, but the sessions had changed. Na Young approached her exercises with new understanding, knowing now why control was so important. Hanbin taught her more than just control now. He showed her how to use her strength to protect herself, to survive. The nightmares came, as they both knew they would. Na Young would wake screaming, memories of cold tables and cruel tests fresh in her mind. But Hanbin was always there, his enhanced hearing alerting him to her first whimper. He would sit with her, telling her stories of her mother, of better times, until she could sleep again. During the day, they'd work their fields and lived their quiet life. Neighbors who saw them thought they knew their story. Refugees from the Rathi attacks, like so many others. They didn't know they lived next to the man who had brought an alien empire to its knees. But Na Young knew. Every morning, watching her father check the perimeter of their farm, she remembered. He wasn't just the gentleman who braided her hair and taught her to farm. He was her protector, her teacher, the super soldier who had torn apart space itself to save her. And if anyone ever tried to harm her again, they would learn what she had learned, that nothing in the galaxy was more dangerous than a father's love, especially when that father had been engineered for war.